11th March 2011, a devastating event occurred that world will never forget. This day witnessed one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded of Japan's eastern coast, specifically in the Tohoku region. The earthquake's magnitude ranged between 9.0 to 9.1 on the Richter scale, making it the fourth largest and deadliest earthquake in the annals of global seismic records. Prior to this, the world had seen the mightiest earthquake in Chile on 22nd of May 1960 with a magnitude of 9.5. This was followed by a 9.2 magnitude quake in Alaska on 28 March 1964 and another devastating 9.1 magnitude tremor off the coast of northern Sumatra in the Indian Ocean on 26th of December 2004. Returning to the event of Japan, the impact of this 9.1 magnitude quake was so profound that its repercussions are still felt today, particularly in the form of nuclear contamination. As if the quake was not calamitous enough, it also unleashed a monstrous tsunami with waves reaching height of up to 40 meters. This massive ball of water crashed over Japan's main island, Honshu, claiming the lives of over 18,000 individuals and obliterating the entire towns. The earthquake, now referred to as the Great East Japan Earthquake or the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, originated east of the city of Sendai, situated 97 km north of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Tragically, residents had a only 10 minutes warning before the tsunami's wrath hit the coastline. At the Fukushima nuclear power plant, the gigantic waves surged over coastal defenses and flooded the reactors, sparking a major disaster. The radionuclides were dispersed over a widespread area, not only in the Fukushima prefecture, but also in the whole of the eastern Japan. As a measure, the governor of Fukushima issued an evacuation decree at 8:50 p.m. on the same day for all persons residing within the limit of 2 km of nuclear power plant, which the Prime Minister of Japan then extended at 9:23 p.m. to all residents within 3 km. Once again, the evacuation order was expanded the following day to all residents living within 20 km of the power plant. This included the town of Tomioka, which is located in the 10 to 20 km belt around the nuclear power plant. Authorities set up an exclusion zone which grew larger and larger as radiation leaked from the plant, forcing more than 150,000 people to evacuate from the area. More than a decade later, that zone remains in place and many residents have not returned. Authorities believe it will take up to 40 years to finish the work of decontamination, which has already cost Japan's trillions of yen. The Fukushima disaster is classified as a level 7 event by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the highest such event and the only second event to meet this classification after the 1986 Chernobyl disaster. Overall, almost 500,000 people were forced to leave their homes as a result of the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear accident. So what actually happened at Fukushima? Systems at the nuclear power plant detected earthquake and automatically shut down the reactors. Emergency diesel generator turned on to keep coolant pumping around the cores, which remain incredibly hot even after a shutdown. But soon after a wave of over 14-meter high hit Fukushima, the water overwhelmed the defensive sea wall, flooding the plant and knocking out the emergency generators. Workers rushed to restore power, but in the days that followed, the nuclear fuel in 3 of the reactors overheated and partly melted the cores, something known as a nuclear meltdown. The plant also suffered a number of chemical explosions which badly damaged the buildings. Radioactive material began leaking into the atmosphere and the Pacific Ocean, prompting evacuations and ever-widening exclusion zone. At least 16 workers were injured in the explosion, while dozens more were exposed to radiations as they worked to cool the reactors and stabilize the plant. 3 people were reportedly taken to the hospital after the high-level exposure. A number of people were later confirmed to have died in the evacuation, including dozens of hospital patients who had to be moved due to the fear of radiation. Although the long-term effects of radiation exposure are a matter of debate, The World Health Organization released a report in 2013 that said that disaster will not cause any observable increase in cancer rates in the region. Scientists both inside and outside the Japan believe that aside from the region immediately around the plant, the risk of exposure remains relatively low. On 9th of March 2021, ahead of 10-year anniversary, a UN report also stated that there had been no adverse health effects documented among Fukushima residents directly related to the radiation from the disaster. The same report also mentioned that any future radiation-related health effects were unlikely to be visible. But many believe the dangers are far greater and residents are worried. Though officials have lifted restrictions in many areas, but most people have not returned to their homes. In one exceptional case in 2018, the Japanese government announced that one worker had died after exposure to radiation and agreed that his family should be compensated. So who was at fault for all the disaster? Nature, TEPCO, the company that was operating the power plant, or the government of Japan for lack of regulation and supervision of such risky located power plants? Critics blamed a lack of preparedness for the event by Tokyo Electric Power Plant, TEPCO, and the government. An independent investigation by Japan's parliament concluded that Fukushima was a profoundly man-made disaster, blaming the energy company for failing to meet safety requirements or to plan for such an event. However, in 2019, a Japanese court cleared three former TEPCO executives of negligence in what was the only criminal case to came out of the disaster. In 2012, Japan's then Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda said that
rather than putting the blame on people, I believe everyone has to share the burden of responsibility to learn from this experience.
And a court ruled in 2017 that the government bore partial responsibility and should pay for the compensation to the evacuees. So how is the cleanup going on of the radiation? These days, several towns in northeastern Japan remain off limits. Authorities are working to clean up the area so residents can return. But some locals have decided never to return because they fear radiation on food and its effect on their genetics. And many have built new lives elsewhere and therefore don't want to go back to where the disaster happened. There are many challenges that remains. Tens of thousands of workers will be needed over next 30 to 40 years to safely remove nuclear waste, fuel rods, and more than 1 million ton of radioactive water still being kept at the site. Since the disaster, power plant company TEPCO has been pumping in water to cool down the reactors, fuel rods. This means every day the plant produces contaminated water, which is stored in more than 1,000 tanks, enough to fill more than 500 Olympic swimming pools. The water was used to cool the highly radioactive reactors, but then it got mixed with the groundwater and the rain. It became contaminated with high level of radioactive nuclides such as cesium and strontium. This contaminated water is then stored in multi-nuclide removal facilities to filter radioactive materials, except for tritium, to nearly undetectable amount. And subsequently, Japan stored the radioactive water in the tanks at the plant site. Much of it is planned to be treated second time. The wastewater is planned to be diluted to 1500 becquerels per liter. And becquerels is the measure to check the radioactivity level. And at last, TEPCO plans to release the treated wastewater via an undersea tunnel of 1 kilometer off the coast. Japan says it needs the land occupied by the tanks to build new facilities to safely decommission the plant. It has also concerns about the consequences if the tanks were to collapse in another natural disaster. Japan is releasing the wastewater into ocean gradually, with a green light from International Atomic Energy Agency, which is an intergovernmental organization that seeks to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy and an autonomous organization within the United Nations, and also has a permanent office at Fukushima. The first release is one of 4, scheduled between now and the end of March 2024. The entire process will take at least 30 years. If Japan was able to remove all radioactive elements from the wastewater before piping it into the ocean, perhaps it would not have been so controversial. The problem is being caused by a radioactive element of hydrogen called tritium, which can't be removed from the contaminated water because there is no technology to do it. Instead, the water is diluted. The message from experts is that the release is safe, but not all scientists agree on the impact it will have. By the way, who will call them experts if they all agree on the same things always, right? Coming back to our story. Tritium can be found in water all around the world. Many scientists argue if the level of tritium are low, the impact is minimal. But critics want more studies on how it could affect the ocean bed, marine life, and humans. TAPCO is saying that they have seawater samples and the radioactivity levels are well within the safe limits, with a tritium concentration below 1500 BQ per liter. Now here lies the most of the controversy. For comparison, Japan's regulatory limit allows a maximum tritium concentration of 60,000 BQ per liter. The World Health Organization allowed 10,000, while the US has a more conservative limit of 740 BQ per liter only. James Smith, a professor of environment and geological science with Portsmouth University, said that in theory you could drink this water because the wastewater is already treated when it is stored and then it is diluted. And the physicist David Bailly, who runs a French laboratory measuring radioactivity, agreed, adding, "The key thing is how much tritium is there." And he said, at such level, there is no issue with marine species unless we see a severe decline in fish population. But some scientists say we cannot predict the impact of releasing the treated water. American professor Emily Hammond, an expert in energy and environmental law with George Washington University, said, "The challenge with radionuclides, such as tritium, is that they present a question that science cannot fully answer. That is, at very low level of exposure, what can be counted as safe?" The US National Association of Marine Laboratories released a statement in December 2022, saying it was not convinced by Japan's data, and the marine biologist Robert Richmond from the University of Hawaii told the BBC, "We have seen an inadequate radiological and ecological impact assessment that makes us very concerned that Japan would not only be unable to detect what's getting into the water, sediment, and organisms, but if it does, there is no recourse to remove it. There is no way to get the genie back into the bottle." Sean Burney, a senior nuclear specialist with Greenpeace East Asia, said tritium can have direct negative effects on plants and animals if injected, including reduced fertility and damage to cell structure, including DNA. Robert H. Richmond, director of Cavallo Marine Laboratory at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, is among a group of international scientists working with the Pacific Island Forum to assess the wastewater release plan, including visits to the Fukushima site and meeting with TAPCO and Japanese authorities and the IAEA. After reviewing the detail of the plan, Richmond called it ill-advised and premature. One concern is that diluting the wastewater might not be enough to reduce its impact on the marine life. Pollutants like tritium can pass through various levels of food chains, including plants, animals, and bacteria, and be bioaccumulated, meaning they will build up in the marine ecosystem. World's oceans are already under stress from climate change, oceans acidification, overfishing, and pollution. The last thing it needs is to be treated like a dumping ground. And now, under all these controversies, China has banned Japanese seafood as a result of wastewater release. Japan believes this as a political move, especially as experts they are quoting say there is no scientific evidence backing concerns around a seafood, as radiation released is so low. And China are quoting their side of experts who say that tritium can pass through various levels of food chains, including plants, animals, and bacteria. China has strongly opposed the release of wastewater from Fukushima, claiming it is, and I quote, nuclear contaminated, and described the step as extremely selfish and irresponsible. Japan is allocating 20.7 billion yen, which is equivalent to $141.4 million, as an additional relief package for the fishery industry after China's blanket seafood import ban. The money will go to increase domestic consumption, ensure the sustainable production of seafood, finding new overseas market, and mitigate reputational damage. Means they will be running the PR campaign to get public support all around the globe in their favor. The government has pledged to assist the industry in diversifying its seafood export channels so that it is not dependent on generating sales in China only.
To Japan now, where over 1 million tons of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant has begun to be released into the Pacific Ocean.
On August 24, Japan began the treated water release from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. Despite opposition from local fishery, and China imposed an immediate ban on imports of all seafood from Japan on the same day. Seafood shipment from Japan slumped by 67.6% year-on-year in the month of August. China had long been Japan's largest seafood customer, purchasing products worth $496 million in 2022. The potential risk won't just affect Japan's seafood exporters, their fishery industries and Asia-Pacific region. One study of 2012 found that bluefin tuna had transported radioactive isotopes like the ones in the nuclear wastewater from Fukushima across the Pacific to California. Experts say the wastewater could be carried by ocean currents, particularly the cross-Pacific Kuroshio current, which will impact the North Pacific current, which will further affect the California current, affecting the Canada's and United States coastal areas. Many people who are exposed to the Pacific Ocean every day have concern too. Some shoppers have stocked up on seafood and sea salt on the fear that the prices on these products may be impacted by the wastewater release. In South Korea, sea salt prices have jumped, with store owners saying their sales had doubled recently. Traditional female divers in South Korea known as Hanyo say that they are anxious. Now they feel unsafe to dive into the ocean. Fishermen around the communities fear their reputation has been permanently damaged and worry for their job. Opinions is mixed among the Japanese public too. A survey by Asahi Shimbun in March found that 51% respondents supported the wastewater release, while 41% opposed it. Earlier this year, residents in the capital Tokyo took to the streets to protest the plan of wastewater release as well. So as we conclude, we turn to you, our viewers. The debate is intense. Some scientists believe releasing the treated water is safe, while others warn of the potential danger. We are eager to hear your perspective. Where do you stand on this critical issue? Dive into the discussion and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. So if you like the video, don't forget to share, comment and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.